It happens on a Tuesday morning, or perhaps a quiet Sunday afternoon. You're driving to the store or sitting on your porch. The sky is clear blue. There is no air raid siren wailing in the distance, no breaking news alert flashing on your phone, and no ominous cloud on the horizon. Modern disasters are supposed to be loud, but this one arrives with a terrified silence. In the blink of an eye, the invisible hum that powers every aspect of your existence simply stops, and the world you knew a moment ago is gone forever. But the threat that ends modern civilization as we know it doesn't arrive with a bang. An electromagnetic pulse, EMP, whether triggered by a solar event or a high-altitude nuclear detonation, arrives without a sound, without a flash, and without a single siren wailing. There is no visible destruction in the sky, no heat wave, and no fire. Yet, in that single silent instant, the world changes. We often forget that life in the United States is tethered to electricity in ways we rarely consider. Our power plants synchronize across vast transmission lines. Our water systems rely on electric pumps. Our hospitals, banks, and traffic signals are all interlinked. They all operate on one fragile assumption, that the power will always be on. A single large-scale EMP ends that assumption in less than a second. Scientists describe it as a wave, a burst of electromagnetic energy sweeping over a region, inducing voltage surges in anything that carries a current. To the unprepared eye, the world looks exactly the same, but inside the machinery, thousands of delicate circuits exceed their tolerance and fry instantly. Computers freeze mid-task, engines stall on the highway, the grid simply flickers out. Across our cities, the first sign is small and confusing. Streetlights blink off, elevators stop between floors. The electrical hum of daily life fades into an unnatural heavy quiet. This isn't panic yet, it is absence. The absence of noise, of information, of direction. In that silence, millions of people stop and ask the same question at once. What just happened? The first reaction of the human mind is always denial. When the lights go out, we instinctively reach for a flashlight and check the breaker box. We assume a transformer blew down the street or a storm knocked out a line. We wait for the flicker that signals the return of normalcy. But this is where the illusion of the modern world shatters. This is not a blackout. Blackouts are temporary interruptions in the flow of energy. The machinery remains intact, waiting for the current to return. An EMP is different. It is electronic paralysis. In a standard power outage, backup systems kick in. Hospitals switch to diesel generators. Emergency lights hum to life. Police radios crackle with instructions. But in the wake of an EMP, that safety net is gone. Generators sputter and fail, their control boards fried by the surge. The sophisticated electronics designed to save us, shielded only against weather or minor surges, are rendered useless in a nanosecond. The most chilling evidence of this collapse happens on our roadways. In a normal blackout, traffic signals die, but cars keep moving. In an EMP scenario, vehicles built with modern, computer-controlled ignition systems simply roll to a stop in the middle of traffic lanes. It is as if the entire nation has stalled in the same breath. Drivers step out of their vehicles, not in anger, but in confusion, exchanging speculation in a rising murmur of uncertainty. The visible collapse is not buildings falling, it is movement ceasing, and then comes the silence. We expect sirens. We expect the emergency broadcast system to cut through the static with instructions, but those systems require power, and the networks they rely on are dead. Even the government cannot speak to the public, and the public cannot speak to itself. As the first hour ticks by, the terrifying reality sets in. Phones do not reconnect. The internet remains a blank void. Automobiles sit like bricks of steel and glass. The machinery of modern life has not simply paused, it has been destroyed. This isn't an inconvenience to be waited out with a board game and a candle. It is the sudden, violent realization that the tools we rely on for survival, logistics, communication, transport, have been taken away, leaving us suspended between the familiar world of yesterday and the dark uncertainty of tomorrow. As the sun sets on that first chaotic day, a profound darkness settles over the continent. The glow of street lamps, storefronts, and headlights, the artificial aura we have lived within for a century, vanishes. For the first time in generations, millions of Americans experience a night without electricity, and in this darkness, a quiet, terrifying realization takes hold. No one is coming to fix this. this, but that isn't entirely true. The government is moving. It just isn't moving toward you. While civilians stand in their driveways staring at dead cell phones, the federal apparatus is executing a plan rehearsed quietly for decades. The United States maintains hardened communication networks designed specifically to survive this exact scenario. Deep underground bunkers, secure satellite relays, and military radio bands shielded from EMP effects snap into action. These are the backbones of continuity of government, systems built during the height of the Cold War to ensure the state survives even if society stops. Within minutes of the strike, the National Military Command Center activates emergency protocols. NORAD facilities transition to isolated, hardened systems. The president and key members of the executive branch are not reaching out to the press. They are being relocated to secured sites carved into mountains. These movements are precise, rehearsed, and invisible to the public. The disconnect between the government and the governed has never been wider. The public expects information. They expect sirens, emergency broadcasts, and guidance. But the government isn't talking because its leaders are facing a much larger question. Was this an attack? If the EMP was nuclear in origin, a high-altitude detonation, then the nation may already be under active threat. The primary responsibility of the National Command in this moment is not disaster relief. It is the prevention of a second strike. Fighter wings scramble under manual command. Strategic submarines surface for radio confirmation. Missile defense radars sweep the skies for inbound trajectories. Every ounce of federal attention is focused upward, looking for the next blow, while the chaos on the ground is left to fester. This leaves the average citizen in a vacuum. State and local governments, your mayors, your governors, your local police, face a harsher reality. Unlike the federal military apparatus, most local infrastructure lacks EMP hardening. Their emergency coordination systems rely on the same digital networks that just died. Without radios, without the internet, and without public alert systems, local leaders are rendered mute. The disparity is brutal. Military command remains operational. Civilian infrastructure does not. Even if the federal government knows exactly what happened, they cannot tell the public, not electronically, and certainly not instantly. So, while generals in bunkers model escalation risks, you are left in the dark, wondering why the cavalry hasn't arrived. The silence isn't an oversight. It is the sound of a system saving itself, leaving you to do the same. To understand the speed of the collapse, you first have to understand how modern America feeds itself. We live in the era of just-in-time logistics, a hyper-efficient system where grocery stores are no longer warehouses. They are merely display cases. The true inventory is constantly moving, floating on highways in the back of 18-wheelers, timed to arrive exactly when needed. This system is a marvel of efficiency, minimizing waste and maximizing profit. But it has a fatal flaw. It relies entirely on synchronization. It assumes the internet works, the orders are processed, and the trucks are moving. When the EMP hits, that synchronization shatters. The global network of logistics, once invisible and taken for granted, collapses in the span of a few silent hours. It starts on the interstates. The diesel trucks that form the arteries of our economy are immobilized, their electronic control modules fried by the surge. They sit dead on the asphalt, miles from their destinations, carrying the food and medicine that towns are already beginning to need. By the second day, the consequences reach your local neighborhood. The grocery shelves, barely stocked to begin with under the lean inventory models, empty rapidly. But it's not just about empty shelves, it's about the infrastructure of the store itself. Payment systems are offline, meaning cash, if accepted at all, is the only currency. Refrigerators are dead. The hum of the freezers stops, and a ticking clock begins. Thousands of pounds of meat, dairy, and frozen goods begin to thaw. In a matter of hours, the food supply doesn't just vanish, it spoils. People begin rationing, not because they want to, but because the realization hits them. The truck is not coming tomorrow, but food is a secondary problem. The most immediate and terrifying scarcity is water. We often forget that water is heavy, and moving it requires immense power. Modern water treatment plants and pumping stations rely on electric power and automated controls to push water through the grid and up into water towers. Without electricity, the pressure in the municipal pipes begins to fall. Filtration systems fail. Reservoirs empty without warning. By the second afternoon, you turn the tap and instead of a steady stream, you get a sputter, a drip, and then nothing. For millions of Americans, clean water becomes the first critical pressure point. Families are suddenly forced to boil water over gas grills or wood fires, collecting rainwater or melting ice from failing freezers. Waterborne illness, a ghost from the 19th century that we thought we had banished, returns quietly to the developed world. This is the death of logistics. It is the moment when the complex web of modern convenience, the ability to buy a gallon of milk at midnight, the assumption that water flows uphill to your second-floor bathroom, unravels. The just-in-time system wasn't built for resilience. It was built for speed. And when the speed hits zero, the abundance hits zero with it. There is an old adage in the intelligence community that civilization is only 9 meals deep. It implies that the veneer of social order, the polite queuing in lines, the respect for property, the patience in traffic, evaporates after 3 days without food. This is the 72-hour threshold. And in an EMP scenario, this is the moment where the crisis shifts from a technical failure to a human one. By the 3rd day, the novelty of the power outage has vanished. The water pressure is gone. The freezer is warm. The silence of the radio is no longer confusing. It is ominous. This is the environment where anxiety curdles into aggression. The first casualty of this phase is the public's reliance on law enforcement. We have grown accustomed to 911 being an omnipresent safety net, a guarantee that if trouble arises, help is minutes away. But in this new world, that safety net is a silent memory. Police officers, stripped of their patrol cars and digital dispatch systems, are forced to operate under extreme limits. They patrol on foot or bicycle, prioritizing only the most catastrophic threats. They cannot be everywhere. In fact, without communications, they likely don't even know where the crime is happening until it is too late. With the authorities blinded, the responsibility for security devolves instantly to the citizen. The centers of commerce, gas stations, pharmacies, and grocery stores become immediate flashpoints of tension. These were once places of mundane errands. Now they are battlegrounds for survival. Arguments over the last case of water or the remaining insulin turn into physical fights. The thin layer of social order begins to fray as panic becomes visible. However, the transcript of this collapse reveals a divergence. It is not universal chaos. It is a split between those who isolate and those who organize. Neighborhoods that attempt to wait it out behind locked doors often find themselves overwhelmed by the desperation outside. In contrast, communities that communicate and organize survive far more easily. We see the emergence of ad hoc governance, a rotating night watch patrol to deter opportunistic theft, a neighbor with a working generator sharing power to keep a diabetic's insulin cold. But these acts of cooperation require a difficult mental shift. Individuals must confront decisions once left to institutions. Who receives the last doses of refrigerated medicine? Who drinks the clean water first? Who stands guard through the night? These are no longer theoretical ethical puzzles. They are daily calculations made under pressure in a world without certainty. The 72-hour mark doesn't just test our infrastructure. It strips away the luxury of neutrality. In a world without police dispatchers, every stranger is a potential threat or a potential ally, and the decision must be made before they get up the driveway. The primal instinct is to hoard and hide, but the history of survival tells us that the only way to endure the long night is to build a tribe. By the end of the first week, the initial shock has faded. The paralysis of what happened gives way to the pragmatic necessity of what now. As the grid remains dark, a massive societal inversion takes place. We call this the Great Regression. For the last 30 years, society has rewarded specialization in the digital realm. We built an economy on data, on software, on intangible assets. But in a world without screens, the high-tech dependent, the day trader, the software architect, the social media influencer finds their skill set rendered instantly obsolete. Their wealth, stored in cloud-based banking servers and digital portfolios, is theoretically still there, but practically inaccessible. Currency loses its meaning when digital banking is offline and physical cash is scarce. In this vacuum, a new economy emerges, one based on tangible value. Barter becomes the standard. The new units of trade are not dollars or Bitcoin, but batteries, hand tools, antibiotics, and canned food. And with this economic shift comes a shift in status. The people who were once viewed as having outdated hobbies are suddenly the most essential members of the community. The low-tech masters rise. A retired nurse, perhaps overlooked in a high-tech hospital system, becomes the supreme medical authority on the block. A backyard mechanic, the guy who knows how to fix a carburetor without a diagnostic computer, becomes the key to mobility. The hunter, the gardener, the carpenter, each of these roles becomes a pillar of survival. Information, too, regresses to its physical form. With the internet gone, communities return to the bulletin board and the handwritten notice. Schools and community centers transform from places of digital learning into distribution points for water and knowledge. People rediscover the power of local knowledge, gathering information the old way, by walking door to door and talking to their neighbors. This period is difficult, but it reveals a profound truth. Human beings have lived without electricity for 99% of our history. What feels impossible to the modern mind is not new. It is simply forgotten. The Great Regression is painful for those addicted to convenience, but for those who remember how to work with their hands, how to fix what is broken, and how to exist without a signal, it is not the end. It is simply a return to fundamentals. Recovery, when it finally comes, does not arrive with the flip of a switch. It is a slow, grinding process, measured not in cities restored, but in neighborhoods stabilized. Slowly, at regional levels, the machinery of the nation begins to turn again, but it is hand-cranked. Military engineers are seen rebuilding substations by hand. Emergency convoys move across the interstate under manual coordination, navigating by paper maps rather than GPS. Technicians work tirelessly to stitch together isolated pockets of the grid. But the United States that emerges from the darkness is not the same one that entered it. The greatest lesson left behind by the silence is not about the fragility of technology, but about the fragility of dependency. We realize that modern life was built on invisible supports, power, logistics, instant communication, that we mistook for permanent rights. When those supports vanished, we learned that survival did not come from the panic of the mob or the force of the gun. It came from the quiet, enduring virtues of the past: skills, cooperation, readiness, and composure. The EMP forces a return to fundamentals: water, food, shelter, community, and discipline. It strips away the comfort of convenience and leaves only the bedrock of character. In the end, the question was never just what happens when the grid fails. The real question, the one that defines the future of the nation, is far more personal. Who are we when the lights go out? As it turns out, we are exactly who our ancestors were: resilient, capable, and ready to rebuild, one brick at a time.